Pastor, I might just make an announcement like segment.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We'll start in about 5 minutes as there are a few people who are still coming in. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Once again, thank you so much for coming in on this somewhat rainy day. This is arguably the most important session for this year, so I really appreciate you being here. Okay, so we're going to talk about assessment. Assessment in the MYP. If you do have children in the diploma program, This is a very helpful session because certain components of the DP are marked the same way. Okay, so it'll give you a good understanding about how internal assessments or IAs are marked. Okay, so I'll give you a few seconds to go ahead and scan the QR code on your mobile phones. That way you'll be able to answer the questions that come up. And we'll take it from there. And if at any time you get logged out, the code will always be at the very top of the screen. I'm Mr. Carrier, for those of you that do not know me. I'm the MYP coordinator here at ISD, and I'm responsible for the curriculum from grade 6 through grade 10. Okay, we have about 18, 19 people who are in so far. So this is one good way of recording the numbers who are attending this session. So I'll give you about 30 more seconds to log in, and then we'll begin. All right, let's get right to it. So the first question I'm going to ask you is this. Give me an idea of what grade levels your children are in. So go ahead and select whichever apply before you hit the submit button. That way we have an idea of who we have in here. Okay, it's quite spread out. Mainly MYP, which is good. Okay, thank you so much for that. So we go ahead and get right into it. All right. Here's our agenda. I'll quickly go through that. So we'll talk about what assessment is and the different types of assessments. Then we'll talk about understanding how we mark, which is criterion-based assessments and how those are assessed here at ISD. We'll talk about report card grading, so we have a good understanding of how we do report cards here at ISD. And then we'll have a break for about 7 minutes. You can step outside, get something to quickly eat, grab some juice, and come back in because I need you fresh for the last session because we're going to mark a paper together. So that way you have a good understanding of how we grade papers in the MYP. Okay? All right. So here's the first question. On your mobile phones, you should have a question that pops up there, which is, when you hear the word assessment, what do you think of? What comes to mind when you hear assessment? And I'll show you what kids usually think about when they hear that word. Okay, so I'll show you what you guys are saying. And you're pretty much saying this, yes, an evaluation. It's a test of some sort. I like the word performance. These days we talk about performances of understanding, which is what an assessment is, and that can be demonstrated in various ways. So most of you are saying test, because yeah, pretty much we're all from the old school, right? It's just test, assessment. And the kids think the same thing. In fact, they freak out. When they hear that word, that's the first thing that comes to mind. Oh, it's a test. You know, they're going to evaluate me. Yes, to a certain extent, we are going to do that. But it's also very much about their learning. And that is what we always try to bring it back to. Okay, so I'll talk to you about what an assessment is and the different types of assessment first. So, in the IB, we have various aims of assessment. We have about 6 of these. So I'll start off with the first one. It's a means of supporting the learning process of students, right? So we do that so we can give them feedback to improve their learning. But it's not only for the kids, it's also for the teachers. Because if I give out an assessment task and pretty much half of the class doesn't do well, that's not really the kids. I need to reevaluate how I'm assessing. It's probably my own teaching process. So it's also for the teachers. Now, we're trying to promote deep understanding, so we always put assessment tasks in some sort of context because we know the best learning happens in some local or global context. So we're trying to promote deep understanding of material. But not only that, we're trying to get kids to connect disciplines. We're trying to help them solve real-life problems that are grounded in multiple disciplines. So we also assess them through interdisciplinary units, so which are grounded in various disciplines, 2 or more disciplines, actually. Now, this one is actually an interesting one because we reflect on the international minus of the program by allowing assessments to be grounded in certain cultural and linguistic contexts. So when we talk about exams in grade 10, for example, students don't have to take it in English. They can take it in various languages as well. And it's my job to register them for the language that they're most comfortable. Our assessments in the MYP are meant to really promote deep thinking, critical thinking and creative thinking skills. So if we're trying to do all of this, the first thing you can quickly eliminate is what sort of assessment task would you think? You cannot do all of this on what? Anyone? Yeah, you'll never see a standardized multiple choice assessment in MYP, not as a summative task, because you cannot look for critical thinking, creative thinking in those things. We just guess right, C is always right, that sort of thing. So that's one thing you can eliminate. So let's talk a bit more about what these assessment tasks are. They're simply mileposts, okay? And we encourage students to understand that wherever they are is temporary. It's just a checkpoint. And we're there to assist them and support them to help improve their learning. So as they go on this journey, we're there to give them feedback, formative feedback, but we're also there to evaluate them because that is what we do. We have to get an idea of where they are at some point in time. But we have to remind them that this is a journey and it's forever changing. Okay, so assessments is mileposts. So when do assessments take place? They take place at various points in the unit. At the very beginning we have what we call a diagnostic test, for example. We need to check and see what the prior knowledge is. So a teacher may give that, but throughout the unit as well, they may give formative checks for understanding, what we call assessment for learning, and give them formative feedback to help them improve. But at the end of the unit, we will have what we call a summative assessment, which is where we evaluate them or evaluate their understanding at that point in time. But again, that will change because we will shift on to another unit until we get to the end of the year. So assessment takes place at various points in time. We'll talk about the difference between formative and summative assessments in a minute. So what are formative assessments? These are like quick checks. It could be a quiz, it could be an exit tape, it could be a gamified escape room. Anything to sort of look at where the kids are and give them some feedback to help them improve. Okay? So we're always giving them feedback. In whatever subject, you will always have formative assessments to help them improve. We call these assessments for learning. And then at the end of the unit, or if you're in design, it'll be at the end of the criterion, you will have a summative assessment to really evaluate where they are at that point in time. Okay? So, I like that phrase right there. When the cook tastes the soup, that's the formative. But when the guests are doing the same thing, that's the summative, because we're being evaluated by someone else. So we've got 2 types of assessment tasks. The formative, and those grades are not included in the final mark, because they're there to help improve learning. Because at some point, after giving you all this feedback, I'm going to evaluate you and see where you are. We call that the summative assessment. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Formative and summative. All right? So, as a reminder, we always let the kids know that, look, yes, assessments are there to sort of give you feedback and evaluate you, but remember that where you are is always temporary, they'll always change in time. So it's our job to help you improve your learning. Okay? So we're going to practice some formative and summative assessing, and you're going to do this on your mobile phones. So what you're going to do is, we're going to go through the formative process in a minute, and you are going to look at some classrooms that will show up on your screen in a minute. Now what I want you to do is, you're going to give the teachers of this classroom, of these classrooms, some feedback, all right? help them improve their learning setting or their learning environment. So you can grab your mobile phones now, and then look at the classrooms on your screen, and give the teachers some tips about how they could improve their classrooms. You should have about 6 of them there. So this is a means of giving them formative feedback. What are your thoughts about those classrooms there? How can these teachers improve those classrooms? So take about 30 seconds or so to do that. And this will give you an idea of how we give formative feedback, depending on the material that's being learned. And it's not always the teacher who's giving this. It could also be from your peers. So we do peer-to-peer feedback as well. Okay, so we have explained the goal, quiz. Can you guys see the classrooms that are there? Yeah, you can choose anyone. Just give the teachers some tips of how they could improve these classrooms. Order, color, teamwork opportunities. Okay, accommodate small group work. You're probably looking at the desks in your typical sort of rows and columns fashion. Add more color. Not so formal and rigid. Okay, so this is one way of giving formative feedback. I think you get the point, right? Okay, so this is just a practice on how to give formative feedback. Okay, so now we're going to sort of summarize this and give summative feedback. Okay? And we're going to go through the same process. Now you'll only have 2 classrooms that are going to show up. And what I want you to do is, you are going to grade each class on a scale of 1 to 8. 1 being the worst, 8 being the best. Go ahead and grade it anyhow, and they show up. So those are your 2 classrooms. Before you press submit, select the grade for each classroom. 1 being the worst, and 8 being the best. Whatever comes to your mind. So we have about 11 answers so far out of 46. I'll give you another minute to do that. I'm doing this so I can get to see how you all are thinking. And in a minute, I'll show you the results, and then we'll have a short discussion about that. "27, you give it a few more seconds. We've got 47 people in here. Some people haven't answered yet. Okay, here we go. Those are your results for the 2 classrooms. Can someone tell me what the problem is with this, with that? Anyone in here? What are your thoughts? Or what do you see about the results?
Not conclusive.
Not conclusive, yes. Why?
There's no metrics by which you're judging the classrooms, and the distribution is just all over the place.
Very spread out. We're pretty much grading on different things. So what do you think is missing? Metrics. You mentioned metrics.
Criteria.
Precisely, exactly. We need a common lens because we're all looking at different things. That's why we're all over the place. We're very spread out. So that is exactly what we do in the MYP. We have to come up with clear criteria because is that grading fair? These are some of the questions that come up. What are you basing it on? You're basing it on very different things, right? So we have to come up with a clear criteria. So how do we do that? We can simply decide what the lenses are. And this is a PowerPoint that I use with the kids as well, so they have an idea of what the criterion is. So we come up with a scale, all right? So we can say that's the bottom of the scale there, that's the very top. But we have to choose a criteria or lens. And one lens could be what? Cleanliness. So on the very bottom of the scale there, we have filthy, disorganized, quite tidy, super tidy. Hopefully you're getting the idea. We have a lens, we have a scale. Okay? And this is pretty much how we assess students. We use criteria, and we have metrics on a 1 through 8 scale in each class. So for each class, well, of course, it won't be the same for each subject, right? And it won't be the same for each grade level. Criteria for kids in a science class, 18, 19-year-olds, won't be the same as the criteria in the science class for 11 to 12-year-olds. Okay, it'll be different. So, in each class, we have 4 criteria that we use to assess the students for summative assessments. This is an example from design class. Each class will have A, B, C, D, 4 of them. And in design, we have inquiring and analyzing, we have developing ideas, kids create the product, and then we evaluate or we test the product. So each class has 4 of these criteria that we will use to assess the student. And here's the list of all of them. Just bearing in mind that some have changed. So it's changed for arts, language acquisition, the personal project, and the IDU now have 3 criteria, not 4. But is there anything that you're noticing across classes? What are you noticing about the various criteria? Some are the same, right? And some are very different. Do we see knowing and understanding in quite a few of them? Yes, because there's a difference between knowing and understanding. Knowing is knowing the knowledge or whatever, understanding that. But understanding is actually applying it in a new situation, in a different context. Okay, so it goes beyond the 100% that we're used to in traditional measuring systems. I will talk about that in a minute. You also see communication, right? That cuts across certain subjects. So these are the criteria that we will use to assess the kids across all MYP subjects from 6 through 10. Okay, so we'll talk about reporting just for a bit and we'll come back to this. So the first report card grade that your students will get will come at the end of the first quarter, right before the break, or after the break actually, in October. And then the classes won't have assessed all 4 criteria. You'll probably have 1 or 2 in design, 1 or 2 in mathematics, 1 or 2 in English language and lit. Alright? But then we have the parent conference there, so that you're able to talk to teachers to really get an understanding of where your child is at that moment in time. Remember, it's always temporary. At the end of the semester, by the end of January, all criteria in all subjects would have been assessed at least once. Okay? And this is the first time we actually spit out the IP 1 through 7 grade, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay? End of third quarter, we will consider everything from the beginning of the year up to that point, so it's year to date. So we look back in time and we say, okay, at this point in time, this is where your child is. Okay, we just don't look at that single quarter and say, this is progress. No, it's not. It's from the very beginning to date. We'll do that for the 4th quarter at the end of the year as well. We will consider the entire year. And we will base it on professional judgment. So how do we do this? So here's a hypothetical me, and you are now going to act as my teacher, or my design teacher, and these are my grades at the end of semester 2 in design class. So, for criterion A, I have a 4 on the first assessment, I have a 5, and then I have a 6. You're going to have to decide what is the best fit grade for criterion A. You're going to do that for B, C, and D, so that we have a good understanding of how we assess. Remember, these are out of date, right? So, anyone in here, after the end of semester 2, what is my grade for criterion A? Who would like to try? You may know, so I'm not going to give you. Let's go with the parent. Who would like to try? Any guesses? So for criterion A, what's my grade? What is it? 5. Possibly good guess, I'm glad you said that. But no.
In between. Can it be a range or should it be a number?
Just one. Just one. Good point. No decimal points.
I would say 6.
Why?
That's the best score on the trial, and that's the last one. The first way to see where you are, and I think the last one should be a much better representation of your effort during that period.
Precisely. It is a 6 because there's an upward trend there. Okay? We do not average. Let me say that again. We do not average. We do not average. I'll say that multiple times. Okay, for this particular student, there's an upward trend there. So at that particular point in time, the best grade to give for criterion A would be a 6. Okay, because there is improvement. Next one, we'll go for B. Remember that grade, okay? We'll keep that grade in mind. We'll come back to it 6. So, criterion B. What is my grade at the end of the semester? Or is that one too easy? Yes, okay, 4. We'll go with 4. All right. So what's 6 plus 4? 10. Keep that in mind. We'll come back to it. Criterion C. It's a bit trickier now.
4.
I hear 4. I hear a 3. I hear a 5. Now, this is where the teacher is the best judge of the child. Because one thing could happen is, the teacher might say, that 3 there, they were sick on that day. I'm throwing it out. I could give, therefore, a 5. The computer or machine would average, but only the teacher knows best in terms of progression of that child. That is just one scenario. However, the teacher could also give a 4 as well. It all depends because the teacher knows best. We don't average. I'm trying to get you to understand the best fit model. But in theory, we can't give the grade, only the teacher can give the grade. Okay, so we have 6 plus 4, 10. And let's say we go with a 5. That's what, 15, right? But it could be a 4. So, last one. Any thoughts? So we've got 15 in total, we need one more. Yeah?
Sorry, just to say, but is it possible that it would be a 3 for preferency?
Is it possible?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? It's possible. It's very possible. What could have happened with that? What could have happened with that 5?
No, what I'm saying is, why wouldn't the 3 be possible if from the beginning of the year it's been 4 and then 5, and as you said, the chances are on that assessment that at the end it ends up being 3. That means that the child doesn't actually been as proven how that they can do better. So why is there even a chance?
That is true. The 3 is very highly unlikely, and the situation is very highly unlikely, I must say. But we don't know what could have happened. That 5 could have been a grade where they received some support, for example, or academic misconduct could have taken place. I'm just being honest, it's a potential scenario. But the 3 is highly unlikely, that's correct. Last one, D. So we're at 15 total. Any thoughts there? Four or 5, possibly. Okay, so what do we have now? Let's say with a 4. Yes? Good question. Why are we not picking the highest for D? Because the first grade that came in is a 6, the second one is a 3, and the last one is a 4. Is there an upward trend there? It's difficult to judge because only the teacher knows best. I'm trying to put you in the teacher's shoes. You cannot go into another teacher's class and give a grade. Samashpa. Only that teacher will be able to do that because they know every single child over time at the end of the semester. So it's out of context. And that's okay. I'm just trying to put you in the teacher's shoes. So what do we have? A total of what, 19? Because this is what the teachers will have to do. We'll now sum up all the grades. So we had a 10 and a 4. Sorry, we had a 6 and a 4, 10. And then what did we say? 5 Okay, 15, and then, let's say 5, 20, okay? Now, that 20 is out of what? What is that? Any thoughts? That 20 is out of?
24.
24? Remember, each assessment was out of 8, and we have 4 of them. It's out of 32. Okay, it's out of 32, remember that. So it's 20 out of 32. So you're now ready to give me a final IB grade based on the grade boundaries that are out of 32. Okay? So you put it in the system, you have a 20 out of 32, and I fall within this grade boundary on an IB 1 through 7 scale. So I would be where? I would be at a 5. But the number doesn't really matter. What matters is what's written in there. Unfortunately, you may not be able to see it clearly here, but if you open your mobile phones, you'll be able to read exactly what a 5 out of 7 means. It means that I am able to produce generally high quality work. My communication is secure. I communicate secure understanding of concepts and context. I demonstrate critical and creative thinking, sometimes with sophistication. I use knowledge and skills in familiar classroom and real-world situations, and with support, that's key, with support, some unfamiliar real-world context. So I'm okay, it's a very good grade, I just can't apply what I've learned in new contexts. I'm not quite there yet. So, for some schools that convert this to a percentage scale, that doesn't really well. That 5 is very close to maybe a 90. To get that 7, that's beyond the 100% because you can now apply in an unfamiliar context. Okay? So if your child comes to you with a 5 out of 7, don't think that's not a good grade. It might just take them some time to get to that 7, because to get that 7 overall, you should have very high marks for each criteria over time. Okay? I understand it may be a bit hazy right now, but once the criterion grades start coming in, you'll be able to understand. Remember, criterion is out of 8, but the final grade boundary is out of 7, 1 through 7. And this only happens when? At the end of the semester. At the end of the first quarter, you will get criterion grades some. You might get an A or B grade at the end of quarter 1. But because C and D are missing, we cannot get a full 1 through 7 grade yet. That will come in at the end of the first semester once all criterion have been assessed. Okay? Each unit is about 5 weeks long. 5 to sometimes 8 weeks. 5 to 8 weeks long. And then once we get that first 1 through 7 grade, at the end of the semester, you will always have a 1 through 7 grade throughout, right through to the end of the year. Any questions so far? Yes? You know, I've done this presentation 3 years in a row, and that question always comes up. That is why we have a break, and we're going to grade together, because yes, there is subjectivity. So, thank you for asking that question. Okay? We're going to mark a paper, so you understand that subjectivity does come in, but we standardize to reduce subjectivity. So, very good question. Ali, let's go on break, because I need you fresh. 5 minutes, get some juice out there, some beignets, and we'll come back and remark. So thank you for that question. Sorry, I forgot to mention that food and drink is not allowed in the amphitheater. No, yeah, in the SWT. Okay, go ahead and begin now. So what we have here today is, in grade 10, students get to pursue their own inquiry based on passions, their own interests, and they get to create a specific product, and then they must write a report. And this is called a personal project. So what we're doing now is we're going to mark an IB sample, a sample from the IB, of a personal project report. We're going to grade it together using the rubric, so you have an understanding of how we assess in the MYP. So once you open your folder, on the left hand side you have the report, and on the right hand side you have the rubric, the criteria. There are 3 criteria that we're going to assess this report against. That's ABC, which is planning, ATL skills, and the reflecting. Okay? And behind the criteria is a sheet of paper you can use to write your notes on. Okay? Alright. So let me explain how this is going to go. I will give you about 5 minutes to read pages 1 through 5 in a moment. That's the planning phase. And we're going to assess that against criterion A, which is planning. Okay? Now, if you look at criterion A, planning, you will see 3 strands there. Roman numerals, I, and III. Okay? So each criterion has 2 or 3 strands. What I'm going to do is, we're going to break up the strands. So we're going to give a grade for strand 1, strand 2, strand 3 individually, and then use a best fit model to give an overall grade for criterion A. and then we'll repeat the process for criterion B and then criterion C. Does everyone see the strands in criterion A?
No.
Okay, let me show you. Okay, the project is called A Book About Ivory Coast. Okay? So it looks like this. This is strand 1. So I've pulled out strand 1, which is the student must state a learning goal for the project and explain how personal interest led to that goal. So for strand 1, I have pulled out the descriptors just for strand 1. The descriptors are the numbers. So for strand 1, if a student just states that learning goal, they're in that level 1 to 2 section. If a student states the learning goal and outlines the connection between the personal interest and that goal, they're in level 3 to 4. Do you see the words in bold? Those are key because those are what we call command terms. Each subject has its command terms and they're at the bottom of the criteria. So it's very important that you read and understand what the command terms are, because there's a big difference between explaining and discussing. To explain, you need to give reasons and causes. And if that is missing, you go straight down to level 5 to 6. State has its own meaning. Outlining is a bit heavier than state, which involves a bit more, but it doesn't go into detail. So there's a big difference between the command terms, and it's very important that you ask your teachers for their subject command terms, because it's key. Otherwise the students don't really know what they're doing, or cannot achieve those higher levels in the criteria. So every subject has its own command terms, and most of them cross over anyway. Okay, do we follow? So we'll do this for strand 1, strand 2, and then strand 3. And then we'll give an overall grade for criteria. Okay, so I'll give you 5 minutes now to go ahead and read pages 1 through 5 for the planning phase. once you're done, you can grab your mobile phones and give it a grade based on strand 1. Read strand 1 carefully and give it a grade out of 8. Again, try to pay close attention to the command terms. Does the student state the learning goal for the personal project? And do they explain how a personal interest led to that goal? This is grade 10. Yes. Okay, time is up. Please go ahead and give it a grade. Does anyone have any grade 10 children in here? Okay, so I'll go through the same exercise with them in December once they start writing the report. That way they have an idea of what constitutes a good mark and what doesn't. Okay, only 20 people out of 51 have responded. I'll give you another 30 seconds. Before I show you what we have. Remember, the key is the command terms. And this is your first time, so give yourself some grace. You don't know what the command terms are, you don't really know what the levels are, and that's okay. But as you do this over time, you will know what it requires to get level 7 8. Or did I just give it away? Alright, let's see what you've got. This is the distribution. So, some of you are saying 7, or 10 of you say 7, 2 say 8. That's the distribution. Okay, I'll show you what the kids last year said. The kids are better than you at doing this. That's what the kids last year said. Actually, yeah, they're on the right track. I'll show you what the examiner says. 4. 1. Let's read. The learning goal is stated at the start of the second paragraph. Deepen my knowledge of the history of the country and its history up until now. Only the first paragraph is relevant to AI in addressing the connection between the learning goal and the personal interest. This paragraph includes a summary of 2 key aspects of how the personal interest led to the learning goal. The text outlines, without further detail, that the student has always been intrigued by African history and that they learn too little about African history in school. This account is close to a description, but it's not beyond a summary. To get that level 7, 8, you need to go with reasons and causes to hit that explain. Now, it's subjective, as you mentioned. So we don't expect you to hit the exact examiner's mark, but if you get a 3 or 5, you're within tolerance. However, most of you are way out of tolerance, and that's okay. So you give yourself some grace because this takes time. Alright, so this is at grade 10 level. The expectations are a bit higher at 11 and 12 where we're marking IAs. Okay, so let's continue. So, same criteria, but strand 2. So based on what you've read, give it a grade for, does the student state the intended product, what they're going to create, and do they develop appropriate success criteria to evaluate that product? So the success criteria, I believe, should be in a table, I can't remember, but that is what the student is going to use to evaluate that product at the end of the process. So what are your thoughts? Give it a grade. Let's see. So if you look closely at this strand, level 5 to success, they must state the intended product, and they must present multiple appropriate. Appropriate is a key word there. If you bring in something that's irrelevant, I am penalizing you. That's just how it is. It has to be multiple, appropriate. And to hit level 7 to 8, you must go into detail. Sorry, I know I sound a bit harsh. That's because I'm an examiner for the IIB. But the thing is, the supervisor will grade the report, and it's okay. The supervisor will see the process, the entire process of the child, and they may fall in love with the project. But remember, I'm only looking at the report when I mark. So that is why multiple eyes have to look at this paper. Okay, so let's see what you've got. Okay, you guys are a bit more harsher this time. That's okay. So let's see what the examiners. Now let's see what the kids said last year. Pretty much the same. Right? Examiner says, yeah, I mean, a 4 is fair, but there's something going on here. So the product is stated on page 2. The 3 criteria are presented. However, none of these are demonstrated to be appropriate, except in a general statement, a paragraph above the criteria table. It must be made clear in the report why and how the presented criteria are appropriate, and this cannot be left to the assessor to make an assumption. You have to be explicit. Even if the criteria table includes some amount of text, it provides little detail about specific elements of the product book. Should have been a quality outcome. The success criteria are lacking specifics and have minimal focus on the content of the book. Due to the general statement in the narrative addressing aspects of the criteria suggesting appropriacy, and the success criteria including some details, the strand is marked 5. It's subjective, so 4 or 6 is still within tolerance. Okay? Yes? Sure, that will actually fall under communication criteria. But yes, sometimes, just going to be honest, it does influence the examiner. That's why multiple eyes have to look at it, especially if it's not logically structured. So we tell the kids, please logically structure it. Then again, we're not grading you against communication. That's okay, as long as we see the evidence, it should suffice. But I'm going to be honest with you, it does play on an assessor's mind. Okay, the last strand here. This is strand 3. So what was the first one? We gave it was a 4, then a 5. So let's see what this one is. Now, this is the action plan. So does the student present a clear, detailed plan, which is at the end, for achieving the product and its appropriate success criteria. So I can tell you automatically, if you look in the plan, if the plan does not address the success criteria, you cannot go high in the mark bands. If the student just presents one sentence that's not detailed, you will be hanging on the lower levels of this strand. It needs to be detailed, and relevant. It needs to include the success criteria. So do you see success criteria in the action plan? Do they address that? So if you look at the last mark band here, it says presents a detailed plan for achieving the product and all of its associated success criteria. You must address all of them in detail. Okay, shall we? Okay, this is what you guys have. Let's see what the kids say. Fairly close. They got dinged here. Why? In the plan that is presented, very few items are focused on achieving the product. Only items in the plan that are related to the product are considered when marking this strand. The plan is just beyond superficial. All success criteria are indicated in the third column, but the plan does not show how they can be achieved. It is not enough to label items in the plan without a criteria. The plan also has to show how the criteria are intended to be achieved, which has to align with the content of the success criteria presented earlier. In the steps of the plan presented in this report, only fragments of the criteria are implicitly evident. We address all criteria in detail. It has to be relevant. So overall, what do you think the grade is? 4, 5, 3. What would you give the child for criteria A? So now we're using a best fit model. What do you think is reasonable? A 4? Okay. Usually I'll ask you to do that now, but I think most of the kids said a 4 as well. Yeah. The assessor gave this paper an overall 4 for criteria A. So even if the last 2 are weak examples of the awarded levels, coming to a decision about the overall level for the criteria is pretty straightforward. Sometimes it can be a bit tricky, but this one is pretty straightforward. Any questions so far? So shall we move on to B? Or are you tired? Okay, let's do B. Okay, so I'll give you 4 minutes to read the next section, which is the approaches to learning skills. So students must select approaches to learning skills that they have developed on this personal project. And the idea is to keep it focused with 1 or 2. For this criteria, it's very important that students give evidence, be it a screenshot or whatever, but it has to be in the report so that whoever's reading it has an idea that you've actually put quite a bit of work into it. So if you're done, go ahead and give it a grade. We have about 10 seconds left. This is strand 1, sorry. Does the student explain how the ATL skills were applied to achieve the learning goal? So just the learning goal, not the product, just the learning goal. Okay, here we go. So, quite a few of you said 3. Okay, 4 and 5. Let's see what the kids said. They were more on the 4 side. Right, let's see what the examiner says. 4. That's okay, most of you are within tolerance of 1. Yes, you're meaner than the examiners now, that's okay. That's alright. The first approach is to learning skill addressed is research. There's outline of the importance of researching. There's evidence of research, but it's not referenced. The second skill addressed is social skills. This account is very briefly outlining that social skills will apply, but this appears as aiming towards achieving the product rather than the learning goal. So there's a difference. Learning goal versus product. There is evidence which is not referenced. Please note that the paragraphs with the date attached appear as excerpts from a journal and are considered supporting evidence rather than an explanation of how skills were applied. This is one section where we tell the kids that please do not insert links. Examiners do not have access to links. They cannot click on them because the papers are scanned multiple times and sent to the IP. So it's very important that they use screenshots as opposed to links. Okay, so now we go to the product. Do they explain how the ATL skills were applied to help achieve the product? Okay, you may go ahead and give it a grade. Remember, the key is detailed examples or evidence. So again, most of you 3, 4. Kids were a bit spread out here. Yeah, there's evidence that's not referenced. Okay, so it's just a brief account of thinking skills that's given. A vague example about page structure was included in the account, but only with a statement to have used some research and some creativity. without further description. So overall, what do we think? What were the grades again? I can't remember. Is it 4 and 4?
4 and 4.
Okay. So, kids said 4. I think this one is also straightforward 4. So for criterion B, it's good enough. Okay, last one. Now this one is a bit trickier because this is where the student, if you read at the bottom of criterion C, they talk about the different ways of reflecting. It could be about self-reflection or impact on the community. So for criterion C, make sure you read that extra bit on the bottom there before you give it a grade. So I'll give you a few minutes to read the last section, which is on criterion C. Okay, does the student explain the impact of the project on themselves or their learning? And the key is that command term, explain it. Do they do all of that? Okay, this is what you all have. Some 4, some 5, some 6. Kids said mostly 5. 4. Let's see why. The section of the report starts with a series of statements of the impacts of the project has had on the students' learning. In the second paragraph, there is an outline of how the project has developed the students' research, social and thinking skills. And each of these are outlined. So it does the basic minimum outlining. Out of these, research is the most elaborated, but still not beyond an outline. They haven't really stepped into the describing part. In the next paragraph, a series of learner profile attributes are addressed. It is sometimes unclear what the impact is. The text rather communicates how these attributes have been used, and each learner profile is outlined. So it's enough for outlining, but not enough really to hit describing and explaining. And the last part, do they evaluate the product based on their original success criteria? Do they do that? And do they give detailed examples? Supported with specific evidence. Okay, I'll give you another 30 seconds. Okay, quite a few in the 5 range, some 3 and 4. That's what the kid said, mostly 4. Okay, they went a bit higher here. Why? Does that feel a bit high? Yeah, it does feel a bit high. Let's see, the product is evaluated on a single point rubric on page 12 and on page 14 and 15. This is against all criteria and is supported with evidence, such as the product, the survey, and express opinion. However, all details of the criteria are not evaluated. For example, in criterion A, to change people's perspectives about the Ivory Coast, and in criterion B, to reach a larger audience. Further, criterion B and C are evaluated briefly, sometimes being descriptive rather than evaluative. So overall, what do we say? Okay, kid said 5. Yeah, 5. Now, a best fit model, a best fit between 4 and 6 will naturally be a level 5, unless one of the strands would have been a particular weak example of the level awarded. So if one feels a bit weaker, then there could be a bit of discrepancy there. Okay, but again, remember this is subjective, right? And so the idea is to stay within tolerance, but it comes with practice. A teacher will not get this overnight. That is why it's very important that teachers get together to standardize reports, to grade assessment tasks, so we have an understanding of the criteria and of the tasks we're assessing. So this paper here got a 13 out of 24 because there were only 3 criteria. And the personal project has its own 1 through 7 band. So overall it got a 4, which is okay, but it's not a good paper. So we give the kids examples of, low, medium, high, so they have an idea of what they need to produce if they want to get to level 7. Okay. So this is how we standardize the personal project, to give an idea of how we grade this. So the supervisor will mark the child's paper, and then each report is marked again by a team of 3 to 4. It's anonymized because bias may come in. We only use personal codes. We let the kids know, don't put pictures of themselves on there. Okay? Now, we will accept the supervisor's grade if the supervisor's mark and the standardization team are within tolerance of 2. Now, if it's out of tolerance of 3 or more, then it'll be remarked by myself and Ms. Julianne, and then we will either give the supervisor feedback or the team feedback, depending on where we feel it lies. And then, yeah, we'll give them feedback. And the IB collects a sample from us. If we've got 60 kids that year, they'll take 12 papers, usually some in the bottom range, medium range, high range, and they will mark. If they feel that we're assessing correctly or up to par, then all the grades will stay. If we're being a bit too harsh, they will bump our grades up. If they feel we're being a bit too lenient, they'll be marked down. So that's for the personal project in itself. So the IBO will adjust based on their own moderation. So the grades come out on August 1st for the personal project, once we've completed the entire cycle. So grade 10 parents, I think this is really helpful for you to understand how the personal project report is marked. But hopefully this gives you an idea of how we grade these assessment tasks. Yes, subjectivity comes in, but we try to limit it by making sure teachers standardize it. Okay, and some people always think, well, the examiners, do they really know what they're doing? It's just to give you an idea of the process, because I'm an IB examiner, I do mark for the diploma program. And just because I qualify, yes, we go through qualifying rounds. 1 year doesn't mean I will qualify the next year. So I will have some practice papers to go through. On the left-hand side is the practice session, I'll practice. And then I'll go through my first qualification. So this was done some years ago. I marked math papers for the diploma program. And as you can see, I was out of tolerance for 2 papers. For whatever reason, I have to be in the right mindset. If I'm not in the right mindset, then that's okay, I'm out of tolerance. But I will get a second round. So I go through a second qualification. And if I do that, if I'm within tolerance, I take feedback first. So as you can see, for criterion B, I'm out of tolerance by 1. For criterion C, 1 again. And for criterion E, for the internal assessment papers for the diploma, I was out of tolerance. So I take feedback and then I move on, I go to the second qualification. And then if everything is fine and within tolerance, then the IB will allow me to mark that year. So I will mark about 80 scripts. And if not, they will close it and I will not mark for that year. So all examiners have to go through a qualification process. And whilst you're marking, it's not done. The IB will throw in what they call seeds. You don't know there's seeds, just to make sure that you're marking on track or close to what the principal examiner is marking, how they're marking. So if I'm out of tolerance with 2 seeds in a row, I'm locked out of the system and I'm not allowed to mark again. Well, I will take feedback, the first time from my team leader, and then I will continue marking. If that happens the second time, then I'm locked out of the system for that year. So just to give you an idea of how examiners have to go through the qualification process, just so you're in the right mindset to mark. And so yeah, we grade about maybe 80 to 100 papers, depending on the subject that year. So the personal project, our papers will get sent off to another examiner somewhere. Of course, examiners cannot mark our students' papers in Senegal. But I usually get papers from all over the globe, Singapore, India, you name it. So let's just give, hopefully that gives you an idea of how we grade in the MYP and certain aspects of the diploma program as well. It's criterion-based assessment. Yes, it's subjective, but there's rigor in it. There is rigor in it. It takes time to get to know that rigor. But it's okay to be out of tolerance the first week, but teachers get used to this. So at this point in time, do you have any questions for me?
Online.
Yes.
No, I'm saying they are online.
Oh, they're online? Okay. Does anyone have access to... Sorry, I can't see them here. Bob, do you have access to the online comments?
No. How's the laptop?
Or any other comments? Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so teachers have, in their schedule, they have collaboration time. So they will come together and mark the assessments the same way. Yeah, so there's definitely what we call standardization of assessments. Because yes, there will be subjectivity, but I need to make sure I show it to a colleague and say, hey, what do you think about this? Right, without showing them their names. And they'll say, okay, this is what I think, and if it's within tolerance, it's safe enough to go with my grade. If not, we need to have a discussion. Or maybe even change the task, if we feel it's, not measuring what we're supposed to measure. Yeah. But this is at the grade 10 level. Yes? Yes. Okay, so the students don't have to follow that structure, but it's advised for them to do so. We do give them samples, IB samples, good ones, that they can use to follow, but we also give them tips on how to write their papers, especially if students have difficulty with grammar. We make sure that we tell the teachers, the supervisors, to give them feedback. So they do go through about 3 drafts, and we give them feedback to improve. So that's the formative feedback before the final paper is taken in. And then after that, they can't adjust. Very good question. The product is not assessed. So it's not uncommon to see students who come up with brilliant products, but don't really put in enough on that report. The examiner will only see the report. So that is why we always tell the kids, look, you've done this brilliant job of going through the entire process, and your product is amazing. Just put a little more on your report, because we know you can do it. That's the only thing they see. Any other questions? Yes?
I had a question about referencing. So you said you don't like things, but what kind of referencing is the system for?
Yes, so, okay. For the personal project, we must upload 2 things. The report in itself and a separate bibliography. So we use a MLA format for that. So 2 reports, 2 papers are uploaded. Yeah. And also, they must have 3 mandatory meetings with their supervisor. We upload that information as well. Yes? Yes, usually. It also depends on the task, right? And it depends on the level as well. So for example, the DP, if it's an IA component, that being out of tolerance could be +2 or +3. It really depends. Yeah. Because this one's out of 24, right? It could be different for a diploma IA, which is out of a different, that's about 5 criteria actually. This one only has 3. For the mathematics one anyway. So it depends. Yes? Oh, okay. Thank you. Oh, on the roll. Okay. At the end of, okay, question to you. When do you think we would give an on-roll? Can we give it at Q1? No. We give it at Q2. And yes, I hate saying that word, we do average there. So 5.75 out of all of the subjects on a 1 through 7 scale. That is what we look at to be on the honor roll. We haven't changed that criteria, maybe we would in the future, but that's what, to be on the honor roll at the end of semester 1, semester 2, students should have an average of 5.75 for all subjects. Okay, let's see what's next. Oops. Our reports always evaluated externally. They will ask for a sample. This is the personal project. It's mandatory at all schools if you have the IB. It's the last thing that you have to do in grade 10. So yes, the IB will ask for a sample. However, if it's an internal summative assessment, no, that will not be externally moderated. That will be internally standardized by the team of teachers. Are students and parents given all the grading criteria advanced in the project? So remember, the most important thing once you leave here is to ask for what? From all subjects, each subject has its own command terms, all right? So please ask your child, do you have your command terms for that particular subject? There will be quite a few that cross over, stating, describing, explaining, but some are unique to certain subjects. In mine, for example, mathematics, I think verifying is unique, I'm not too sure, but that can happen. So it's actually the command terms. And yes, they will always be given rubrics as well. They'll be always given the criteria for each task. Do you need to have good grades in every criterion to have it? It depends on what you want. Well, hopefully everyone wants to hit a 7 out of the overall grade boundary, 1 through 7, right? It's not easy to achieve, but it can be done. Now, some will say a 3 out of 7 is passing. That's probably because they're converting maybe to a percentage scale. I think a 4 honestly should be adequate at an MYP level. When I say 4, I mean 4 out of 7, the overall grade boundary. Right? However, we want students to always aim higher for that. Aim higher than that. Okay? Good question. A through F. Okay. Raise your hand if you think a 50% is passing. %50 out of 100. No one in here?
It's passing.
It's passing.
Yes.
Okay. Raise your hand if you think 50% is failing. Thank you. Percentages are cultural elements. So they are. And once you understand that, you understand that everyone has a different understanding of what percentages are. That's why we don't use a percentage scale. Any Dutch in here? Any Dutch? The Dutch have actually 5 levels of failing. It works for them. Failing poorly, failing well, failing really, really well. I'm not making this up. But percentages are cultural elements. The way we look at them is quite different. So that is why sometimes when we deal with percentages, we have to understand at the root of it. In America, we call it grades. In the UK, we call it marks. Right? There are differences there, and they're rooted in culture. Okay? So, but the idea we've chosen a 1 through 7 scale. To give you an idea of what it is, maybe in the French system it's out of 20. Right? Anyone French here? No?
Like.
Okay.
French like.
French like, okay. It'll be 18, 19, 20.
Portuguese.
That's roughly what the 7 would be in the end. Yes? Yes. US universities understand the IB scale. They understand it wholeheartedly. And it's always best to present that at a GPA. Because a GPAs are different schools are not standardized. So if you present the IB score to a US university, they will understand it wholeheartedly. But when you throw a GPA at them in connection with that, you confuse them actually. Because they know what it takes to get that 5 out of 7. But that GPA of 3.9, that might include grades that are effort grades, for example. You know, it's different at different schools. That's what I'm trying to say. So you would rather go with an IB scale because they have an understanding of what it's rooted in. I hope there's a... Did I explain that? I hope. Yeah. Yes, but just percentages mean different things in different cultures. But thank you so much for your time. If you don't have any, thank you so much.